Mike, this is one of those episodes that we look forward to every single time we do it. We get to sit down with Jaime Marconette from Luminate. He's their VP of Music Insights and Industry Relations. And we're going to go over the Midyear Music Report 2025.
One of the great things about Luminate, and it is a perfectly named company because so many things get illuminated in their reports. And I find it just amazing that these people are able to just take so much data and make it in such a readable and interesting report. And the findings are fascinating. It's just a great time to be in this business with all of this stuff at our fingertips.
Yeah, a special thank you to Jaime and his team for, breaking this down for us so it's easily digestible. So now without further ado, here's Jaime Marconette from Luminate. Let it roll.
Stand by for transmission.
This is London calling.
Wake up! The revolution is at hand!
Your morning coffee is on the air. On the air. On the air. On the air. On the air.
Standing by.
Your morning coffee, the weekly music news for the new music business. It's the highly curated, agitated, advocated, moderated, and liberated digital music information that you need to know. We are your digital music authority. And now from our studios in Hollywood, California, here's your hosts, Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart.
Jaime, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to join us. These conversations are always a pleasure.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for having me. Mike and Jay, I really always love coming in and talking about the music industry with you. So this is one of the highlights of the report release schedule for me.
We look forward to this report. Mike and I have been chatting about it. But before we jump into that, for those with no prior knowledge, I want to talk a little bit about what Luminate is, for the industry and not just the music industry, other things that you do and sort of your role. But I wanted to tee that up by giving you sort of my view on it. I see your strengths, your superpowers, Jaime, and correct me if you feel differently. What I love about these reports and these conversations is I get a sense of, shifts in audience behavior. And you guys are really good at identifying trends early that maybe I wouldn't have noticed, where you're like, you need to watch A, B, and C because they're moving a little bit differently, either underperforming or overperforming. And then finally, kind of understanding our audience. It's so key in the industry to know who your audience is, whether it's geo, whether it's demographics, whether it's genre, those kinds of things. And it's crucial if you're going to reach an audience and engage an audience, you need to know who that audience is. So is that fairly close to the way that you see Luminate?
Yeah, for sure. It is. It is really close to the way I see Luminate. I see... So for the audience that might not be familiar with us, we have over 500 daily sources of data. We have the physical and streaming data direct from providers. We have that in physical and streaming in US, Canada, and then we have streaming data in 60 other countries too. And so typically if you come into our system, you see streaming data that happen within 48 hours. It's a massive amount of data. And now this year we have an average of 105,000 ISRCs going to DSPs every day this year. So that really showcases just the vast scale of the data. But within all those massive trillions of data points, there are all these interesting data stories. And so I think where we try to go with the report is, okay, that, obviously the industry needs to know that how on-demand audio is growing, right? But inside of that, there are also wild stories where the industry is growing at 4.6%, yet, maybe country is streaming, much more current music than they have ever before, or so it's all these data stories. And so what we're trying to accomplish with these reports is giving the industry and helping the industry understand the big macro trends that are way beyond just those top level numbers.
Yeah, and talk a little bit about your background too, Jaime. I mean, you're in New York today. You're doing these presentations of this report, but you live in Nashville. And talk a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I'm based out of Nashville. Been in Nashville since 2008. I like to say it is just long enough to know how it used to be. Now, I know that somebody's going to come after me for that, but it was 2008. It's before the big build-up. And spent a lot of my time at a major record label there in town, about 9 years, digital strategy, audience development, those sorts of things. Joined Luminate 3 years ago, which is actually crazy. It's already been 3 years. Time has flown by.
Yeah.
Where I'm Vice President, Music Insights and Industry Relations. Essentially what I do is all those huge amounts of data and all those data points, I help the industry understand the trends that are coming out of them. And so that is the year-end report, mid-year report, a lot of presentations, those sorts of things.
And just because I'm kind of curious, how many people behind the curtain are actually looking at all of this data and crunching the numbers? I mean, it's got to be a Herculean task.
Oh yeah, it really is. I mean, it's multi-team. It's we have members from our insights team, consumer research team. We have a couple of members from my team who are more focused on other consumption elements and data. We start bringing in our film and TV team, which Jay, you alluded, we do have other verticals. We have a film and TV vertical, and then we also have our insights custom research vertical as well. So, we start bringing in those elements. It really touches the whole company, which is pretty cool, right? Because I know that there's a slide in here where we do like the top 10 music documentaries, and that's the film and TV team that's doing that. And so we try to bring in all of these things to really show how, yes, there's these different verticals of the company, but all entertainment is intertwined at the same time. And so it's really fun. But Mike, I have no idea. It feels like it touches the entire company and multiple teams.
Yeah. Well, let's jump in. It's a lot of good news. There's very little bad news from what, just the first kind of scan through the report. I'd love for you to just give us a high level look at how is streaming doing? Because I know we've been reading a lot lately about streaming is growing, but not maybe what people anticipated, whether that was Goldman Sachs or whoever maybe thought in these early projections that maybe it would grow a little bit faster. But it's not all doom and gloom. Talk about how streaming is doing in the U.S. and ex-U.S. right now.
Yeah, so first, streaming is still continuing to grow. It is. But is it true that it's slowing down? That's true as well, especially in your Western markets, the U.S., Canada, other Western markets where streaming has been around a little bit longer. It is slowing down. So right now, on-demand audio growth in U.S. is 4.6%, built on the strength of 30 billion more new net streams than there was last year, whereas last year was 50 billion new net streams over the year previous.
Wow. So
you can kind of see where it's growing. It's just not growing as much, and so that is happening. We are seeing that emerging markets and ex-US markets are really the ones that are powering the growth. Their growth right now is above 12%. Global on-demand audio is above 10%, but I do want to say that those numbers are a little bit smaller than they have been recently as well. So the stuff in the Goldman Sachs report is correct that we are seeing this slow down a bit. And right now the U.S. makes up about 30% of all global on-demand audio streams.
That's a lot. That is
it is a lot. So. Yeah, so it is growing, but I think that I was having a conversation with somebody, but because of the slowdown that we're seeing, we're also seeing some opportunities for innovation, and I think that that's one of the things that we've included in the report as well, is like some new forms of engagement that are starting to grow as the business starts to move forward.
don't you touch on a couple of those since you brought it up, Jamie?
Yeah, sure. Really, really pleased to now have video game data in our system. At the beginning of the second quarter, we started bringing in what we're calling interactive on-demand streams. These are streams from in-game platforms where the user gets to choose what they're listening to, and then also engage with it. Maybe play an instrument or engage with friends around it as well. 200 million of those streams just in the second quarter of this year. Very, very interesting. Then obviously, other, music documentaries and how that, is continuing to engage in around the world. It's just crazy because, one of the stats in the report is that the Becoming Led Zeppelin documentary actually drove their streams to the highest they've ever been, which is just, crazy, especially for an iconic group like that. Then we are seeing, and this is mentioned in the report too, there are seeing some other things that maybe some, controversial elements around AI, generative AI are there. So we're starting to see that creep up a little bit more. And there's a bit on that too. And then the overall takeaway though is that, we are living in a multi-platform, multi-entertainment sphere where it really is sort of interconnected. There's a great piece on Lisa and her work in The White Lotus and how it all fits together as part of like the overall vision of her artistry, right? In many different ways that goes to viewers and listeners.
Yeah.
So there's these new engagement points which are really, really interesting as well.
Yeah, one of the first things that when Mike and I were reviewing the report together, one of the first things that he called out was on the video game side, because for those of us in the music side, sometimes we forget how huge music gaming is and how much bigger it is than the music industry.
It's crazy, right? Like, and I'm sure that a lot of people can quote the numbers a lot better than me, but I will say we had this metric, interactive on demand, coming in since the beginning of April, and 200 million streams so far that we've already got, and that it just shows you the sheer size of that industry. I mean, it's pretty wild, and and a lot of people are discovering music through that too, right?
100%.
Well, what jumped out at me, U.S. gamers, 32% of Gen Z gamers discover new music via video games. A third.
Wow.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, it is really. I mean, some of the numbers around these are really, really, really impactful. And I was talking with a member of the Insights team, Lexi, who's going to co-host the webinar with me, and she was pointing to some of the trends just around female gamers as well, right? Like we've always kind of, there might be a little bit of a thought that maybe it leans male, but we're actually seeing, just about 54% male, 6% female,
that's
and there's
surprising.
a growing segment there, which is crazy because gaming really starts to hit all demos really.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about there aren't very many negative points in here. We saw that, of course, downloads are, they're declining. That's to be expected. But I wanted to talk to you about two separate little points, and Mike and I were talking about this before we jumped on. One is sort of this excluding Taylor Swift. When you do some of these numbers, talk about why you do that and the mindset sort of behind excluding Taylor Swift.
So I talk about this. I will be talking about this in the webinar. You probably won't see it in the actual report. But when we're starting to talk about physical, and we're also looking at total album sales, you have to. We're typically comping against the period that happened the previous year, right? So first 26 weeks of this year versus the first 26 weeks of last year. Well, inside of that, though, there are additional contextual elements, right? So Taylor released the Poets Department, Tortured Poets Department album last year. Tortured Poets Department album last year.
Yeah.
And I was looking in our system, it sold 3.5 million physical units. So in the first half year, right? Like that is going to be, that's a really big number. And then like we're comping against that. So those are some of those contextual elements where you have to, yes, we're seeing that overall physical is down 3.3%, but it's because we're comping against a period of time that had that astronomical number in it. So we do pull that out occasionally where it's like, okay, well, yes, we're down 3.3%, but if we remove Taylor Swift from this equation, what is the rest of the market doing? Mm-hmm. And the rest of the market is actually up. We're seeing that vinyl is up 8% without Taylor Swift. We're seeing that it's up 2% with Taylor Swift.
I'm glad you brought that up, Jamie. I'm sorry to cut you off. I'm glad you brought that up because that was another thing Mike and I were talking about is there has been some confusion in the last couple of years, because Chris Murator came on board and he really helped sort of mend fences and put things together with Luminate and the indie retail community, and it seems like things are going really well there. But are there any asterisks there when it comes to reporting indie vinyl?
So the only asterisk is that this is a new methodology. We updated our methodology in 2024. When we did our mid-year report last year, we weren't able to accurately trend, right? Because then we had multiple methodologies, and even at the year-end report, we were kind of dealing with multiple methodologies as well. So now we actually have a methodology that's consistent. We're able to trend. The new methodology and the new indie modeling data, it's in our next-gen Connect system that we are migrating to, and we've had a lot of conversations with the industry just about that in general. But that's where that data is. And so I think that in our report, you're going to see where the data is coming from. And so the indie modeled numbers are coming from the new Connect system. For the people who are in the weeds on our platforms and you're looking for it, it's in the new Connect system. But it's the updated methodology that we worked hard on. And Chris has done such a great job, really, building that up, and then also just, his relationships with the indie community and Record Store Day and others has just been really, really awesome to see that grow.
Yeah.
I think I ask you this every year, Jamie, and I apologize in advance, but I find it interesting. You look at this stuff all the time. When you first got this report, what surprised you? Was there anything that really kind of jumped out at you and went, oh, that's interesting?
There's actually a lot. Okay. So the fact that, let's see, where do we want to start? R&B as a subgenre is growing. It's growing in volume. And this is sort of counter to the R&B hip hop core genre. For those who are listening, a song can have one core genre, but then it can have multiple subgenres. And this is like, if there's an EDM pop remix, and you're able to call it EDM and pop. But we're seeing that at the subgenre level, R&B has been growing, and Kendrick Lamar and SZA and others. While R&B hip hop at the core genre level has lost some share. It's down in current volume of streaming. But it's great to see R&B as a subgenre having success this year. That's fantastic. Rock, Sleep Token and Ghost topped the Billboard 200. And we see rock as a genre that's growing its piece of the pie. And then if we're sticking with genres, the one other call out is that we are seeing Christian and gospel continue to grow. It passed world music actually in the rankings of volumes. By genre volume, so it actually moved up into the 7th spot, which is a pretty big move for it. So those are a few of those call outs. I mean, Mike, I could just keep going. I mean, we get into using a quantitative method of identifying star thresholds, like superstars, rising stars, emerging. I love seeing all of that stuff. And then I will also say, though, that recession pop, I saw a lot of headlines throughout the first 6 months as recession pop back, and they kind of featured a lot of, artists who might have gotten big during the Great Recession era of releasing new music.
Can you give us a couple of examples of what for our listeners?
That's 2008, 2009, 2010, roughly.
Exactly. So for those recession pop was typically 2007 to 2012, and it was in line with the Great Recession, and it was an escapism. A lot of the music from that time, like Miley Cyrus' Party in the USA and others, were really like kind of this escapism from the financial situation that was occurring all over around us, and scary time to live through. It wasn't great, but obviously some artists like Lady Gaga kind of broke during that period, and they've got Lady Gaga has a new album, and then Kesha has a new album, and so we were starting to look at recession pop as, well, what's actually happening with the pop music that was released in that period? And we are seeing that it is growing considerably faster in terms of streaming than the other genres released during that period. So people are gravitating towards it. We're seeing that the growth rate is also faster than our U.S. industry growth rate. So it's starting to take up share as well. And so it's not just that some of the artists who broke during that period are releasing albums. It's really that listeners in 2025 are gravitating to pop from that time period, which is fascinating. And then in the report we've included like the top 5 songs that were released in that period. But it's is it nostalgia or escapism, or it's
or
kind of
a reaction or
So it was fascinating because we wanted to take a look at it, and then we're like, oh yeah. Yeah, it really is happening.
Yeah. One of my favorite slides in the presentation is on page 20, and it's release age listening. And it's basically a look at U.S. on-demand audio streaming as it relates to catalog. And this is something, Jamie, you and I have talked about for years. There's a designation that anything 0 to 18 months is considered catalog. And I love how you have this chart broken up, because you have that, but then you have catalog that's 18 to 60 months. And then you have 60 months and beyond. And I found it absolutely fascinating looking at the different genres and what the behavior was of the timelines of when people listen to different genres of music. Can you speak a little bit about that one?
Yeah, definitely. And so, yeah, and so current 0 to 18, and then catalog 18 to 60, and then deep catalog after that. So Christian gospel, in terms of the streaming of the music in the songs, like the volume and the share, it actually leans to most current. And what we've also seen, though, is this really is a great indicator of a genre's growth potential, because it's new impact hits, right? And so to see that, you typically see the genres that are growing the most are typically the ones that are also streaming the most current music, which makes a lot of sense. So that is definitely a key point. We've seen Latin and country typically be up there as well. Rock is interesting because rock continues to be one that a lot of the streaming bulk is from the deeper period, the past 60 months. Yet you see Sleep Token, you see Ghost, you see these artists. I think Sleep Token has 70 million U.S. streams the week it came out.
Ghost had their first number 1.
Yeah, exactly. And so, rock's an interesting category because it still leans catalog, but we're seeing some pretty good success out of current music as well.
Yeah, and I'm seeing guitars come back to pop music, Olivia Rodrigo playing guitar or whoever. And I think that's a good sign. And thank you for correcting me there. When it was 0 to 18 months is current, and then catalog starts at 18, and you had it broken up 18 to 60 and 60 beyond. But that chart, you just pointed out two of the, sort of almost outliers, Christian sort of gospel outperforming, when it comes to current. But then rock, if you look at it, it's sort of a small current, and then this huge thing on the catalog side. But I noticed that, country sort of overperforms in, some of the newer stuff as well. I just thought that was really fascinating because we hear all the time that a majority of the music business is catalog, depending on how you designate that. But it is. And it's nice to sort of see it broken up by genre here.
Yeah. Thanks for that. I think that's it's helpful to see those different shares, right, of the release age streaming.
Yeah.
I also find the global import and export trends really interesting. Talk a little bit about just the power rankings. Who are the big exporters? Is that changing dramatically? And kind of what can we see sort of coming the other way?
Yeah, thanks for that, Mike. So we debuted this ranking in our year-end report. It is the export power rankings, and what it does is it covers a country's ability to export recorded music outside of its own borders, right? So the first thing that we do with any of the artists or anything that we're looking at is we subtract their local home country of origin. We're only looking at export. And then it's based on how many countries that particular country's artists go to, where they rank in those countries, the size of the countries streaming that they go into. So there's a bunch of different metrics. It's all weighted, and it has then the export power rankings. Now the top 10. So the U.S. is the number one, meaning it has the most artists going to the most countries that are near the top of the threshold. The UK is number 2. Overall, top 10 is the same as our year-end, except Brazil has moved up into 9 and Sweden has moved to 10. And why I think that is so interesting is because we actually, in our report too, we go through and look at region by region, which country streams the most local music, the most regional music, and the most ex-regional music. So Brazil is moving up in our export rankings, yet it is the most local industry in Latin America. So it has a very differentiated music industry. I think it's like 3 out of 4 streams are a Brazilian artist in Brazil, which is, that's a lot of streams. And so you're seeing this highly differentiated market that's also now reaching new levels of success in exporting. And then I know that they're a top 10 IFPI market as well. So, how that all plays together is super interesting, especially when you start looking at like a market like Brazil, which is starting to have success in that way.
Yeah, and I noticed that, not surprisingly, the United States are, the top importers are all English-speaking countries. Same with UK. Yep. Same with Canada. But it gets really interesting where you get down to some of these non-English speaking countries, whether it's South Korea, Germany, France, and see the different countries where they are, the top importers. For example, France, the top importer, Belgium, number 2, Switzerland.
Yeah, I think, that you definitely start to see these trade relationships, right? And you can start to pick out, okay, well, I can understand why music from this country is being able to be successful in this one, or why this one is importing these. Sometimes it's language, sometimes it's local, geographical areas. But when you're looking at it, great call out there, Jay. When you're looking at it, you can definitely start to see these trade relationships and start thinking, okay, well, is it the language? Is it just like the historical, relationship that they have? Is it that a diaspora is moving and they're starting to live in another country more, and they're bringing artists with them? So you start to see these relationships and map it out, and it's really quite cool to see. And then I really like the analysis that the team did on which country in a region streams the most local, which is the most regional, which is the most ex-regional, because you could start, going, okay, well, Nigeria is the most local streaming African country. If that's a market you're interested in, maybe it makes sense to collab with a local Nigerian artist because they stream so much local music, right? Yeah. So you can start to see how it affects strategy.
Yeah, 100%.
It's so fascinating. I want to jump back to the gaming thing you guys had done. You also broke down the difference between U.S. gamers, Canadian gamers, UK gamers, German gamers. Fascinating to see the difference on how they discover music. And again, breaking down, you guys just started doing the gaming thing, and now you're already kind of breaking it down with different regions, and it's different. And it's really interesting to see how people are discovering, how gamers are discovering music in different territories.
Yeah, for sure. And so our consumer research and insights team is out there, and they're fielding studies, and I think that's been 30 different markets that they fielded studies for. So a lot of this information comes from us directly in these markets, asking listeners in these markets about what their tendencies are. But you're totally right. So what we see between the different fan groups is, hey, German gamers are much more likely to engage with social media. They're more likely to cite friends and relatives, so they're getting recommendations from each other. When you start to dive in, you can start to see, okay, well, how do these pockets of fans engage, or how are they finding out about music? Because one thing I've learned, especially through this role at Luminate, is that fan groups really behave in different ways. Actually, kind of brings us back up to the fact that we had R&B, hard rock, and Christian kind of our top subgenres, but those fan groups are so different. The gamers are sort of the same way. It's like gamers in different areas and different fan groups behave in different ways. So how would we go about potentially engaging with them? And I think one of the call outs too is that gamers in the US, I think, are more likely to stream SVOD content through Netflix and other platforms like Hulu and those. So is there an opportunity to reach these guys through something that's a gamer focused SVOD series?
Yeah. What I love about this report is it shows some like an older guy like me who's not using I'm not playing these games, I'm not doing a lot of short form video creation, those types of things. I can really get a sense how these groups are behaving, and that leads us beautifully into the part of the report where it talks about U.S. fan levels. And there's been a lot of talk lately about super fans. And what I love about this is you've really broken this down by super fan, engaged fan, active fan, etc. But then you sort of go a little deeper and talk about how much time do they spend? How much money do they spend? What is that behavior? Talk a little bit about that U.S. fan level slide.
Yeah, for sure. So the reason why we wanted to really dive in on this is that a lot of the conversation has been, okay, you have your average music listeners, or you have your super fans, right? And it's like, okay, well, I guess we just got two buckets. And it's like, well, no, it's there's a lot more to this, yes. Right? There's levels to this. There's levels of fandom. There's casual fans or engaged or active. And so what we started to do is we started to define these different levels. Like, how does a music listener go down the entire funnel to become a super fan? Like, what are the points along the way? And in the report, we've got attitudes and beliefs. And then we've also got, what you pointed out is like, well, then also, how does it change? Like, how does their consumption change? So we have a music listener, and then at what point do they become like a paid, and not just paid, but DSP, but physical, or how much are they spending on live? And so really mapping that out, and, going through the different levels. And so I'll call out a couple of the different levels here. But, we've got, at the top, we've got all music listeners. And then we go to what we're calling casual fans, which are, they use free ad-supported or program streaming services. Then we go to active, where now they're paid. They're paying for DSPs or physical. At engaged is when they start to, engaging with artists in at least 3 or more activation channels, which we've got listed, but they're, go to a live show, purchase a piece of merch, basic activities. And then after engaged, they become super fans. And so going through this, you can start to say, okay, well, if our ultimate goal is to also move fans down the funnel, just like, every other, business and other industry. But how would you do it? And so it's like, okay, well, maybe we could potentially move a casual fan to an active fan. And I was talking with Lexi, who's going to co-host again the webinar. And maybe we could potentially do some sort of a limited time offer for a, entry level purchase, right? And so you can start putting these strategies together that match your level of fandom. And I think that that's also why we wanted to do this, is that not all strategies can just be broken into super fans and average music listener, right? Like you have to kind of pay attention to where that fan is in the funnel too. That's one of my, I love, I have an integrated marketing communications background, and, and so when we start talking about that sort of stuff and moving consumers and fans, I really find that.
Yeah. This is marketing
And you guys
101.
stayed in,
Sorry, Mike.
in this 18% of U.S. music listeners are super fans.
Yep,
And
yep,
that's a big number.
It is. And it comes from our first quarter of research this year. I know that we've reported some other numbers in the past. I think we were at 18 and then it went to 20%, and we're at 18 again. This was from first quarter of this year, but that means that they've engaged in 5 or more ways. And again, it's buying merch, buying physical, following artists on socials. There's 13 different of these, and then once a particular survey respondent hits the 5 mark and more, then they go into our superfan category.
Yeah, what I love about this is sort of that far column where you talk about music attitudes and beliefs, and one of them that really hit home because
integrated marketing communications.
Exactly, because what you're doing here, this is what marketing has focused on for years: knowing your audience and then engaging your audience. But there's a lot of different names for it, whether it's minnows and guppies and whales, or everybody's sort of got their own terminology for it. But one of the things that really hit home with me, and when I'm looking at engaged fan, it said willing to travel out of town, and buying merch to support the artist, and being the first among your friend group. And these all resonated with me. This is spot on. That's how you can really sort of tell when you've gone from sort of a casual fan who will go to the shows, maybe it'll show up on their playlist, to somebody who's an evangelist, where I call it Jamie and I go, Jamie, have you heard this band? No, you've got to stop what you're doing. You got to listen to this thing. Yeah,
that is a hallmark of the superfan, and championing their artist, right? And early adopters, like all of these things about superfans. And so, yeah, it was really exciting to start, going down that rabbit hole of like, okay, well, what makes these fans, not just the percentage of the fans, but like to your point, like the attitudes and beliefs, like can we really know these fans?
Yeah.
Jay and I, of course, on the program talk a lot about AI lately. And here you've got a thing, generative AI for music creation. And this thing stunned me. 1 in 3 U.S. music listeners are comfortable with generative AI creating song instrumentals with younger audiences more comfortable. And that's a big number.
A little surprising.
We're a little surprising, yeah.
Yeah, I know. It did, when we started to look at it, I thought the 1 in 3, I thought that was, and that is that they are somewhat or very comfortable. There's a spectrum, right? Yeah. It goes from very comfortable, somewhat kind of ambivalent, then somewhat uncomfortable, very uncomfortable, right? That's the spectrum. And so 1 in 3 are in that somewhat or very category up near the top. We did find that in terms of the audience perspective, it seemed that instrumentals, people were most actually okay with that, or not okay. I'll take that back. They're not okay with that, but that was the most that they were comfortable with.
Right.
Sure.
That's a better way to phrase.
And that makes a lot of sense, Jamie, because you're talking about, some people call it functional music. It might be lo-fi hip hop to study by. It might be new agey stuff to sleep or chill. That sort of thing. And that it serves a different purpose than when you're listening.
Yes, and that's a great call out, Jay, because then we also note that, but 44% are either somewhat or very uncomfortable with a song that uses an AI voice. Now, definitely there's different levels of audience feeling and thought on this, and we have some columns where we show different, but yes, we do see that change where you start to go to the voice or to the full song generative AI, which is interesting. But yeah, that was sort of the sort of that switch, right? The instrumental is like,
that's one thing
again, somewhat or very 1 in 3, which but and then you do see it kind of change, right, when you start getting into the voice and whatnot.
Yeah.
This year. It'll be interesting to see what this looks like next
year.
I'm
glad you said that, Mike. I was just thinking the exact same thing. This will be a fun one because it's a new thing for your report. Yeah. This will be fun to see the next, mid-year, year-end, just see how this sort of evolves and how people's opinions of it change, because there was this documentary that Mike and I talked about, and this producer created an AI band called Hoverborg, and he pressed up vinyl and CDs and he sent it out. And not only did he get rave reviews, but he got offers to play festivals. And when he told everybody, when he came clean, a lot of the outlets said, I don't care. And they ran it anyway. So I think that this is going to be an evolution, and I'm really curious to see your reports and see if that really goes that direction where, look, a great song is a great song. I mean, in fact, I'd love to get your thoughts on this, Jamie. Mike and I were talking before we hit record about, it wasn't that long ago when, our kids were listening to a lot of Skrillex or Deadmau5 or whatever, which was sort of music created with a laptop, not somebody sitting down and learning how to play piano, right? Mm-hmm. And that was sacrilege. I mean, drum machines or synthesizers, that was like, it's going to put everybody out of business. It'll be interesting. I'd love to get your take. Do you think this is sort of a tool that people are going to be using to help them in their songcraft, or that there's just going to be this avalanche of just AI slop?
So, okay, there's definitely been some pretty high-profile uses as a tool too, right? The Beatles, where they were able to separate the John Lennon vocal from the piano demo, I think it was. Obviously, Randy Travis, and then I know that Brenda Lee, "Rocking Around the Christmas Tree," they redid it in Spanish, other languages, right? And so we are starting to see artists starting to use technology and use this as a tool. To be able to, carry out their artistic vision. So we are starting to see it as a tool. It will be really, really interesting to also see how the more, fully AI artists, bands, groups, that also starts to take, because each one of the examples I just said, right, it was like well publicized that they were using AI to help create this and help bridge a gap that they needed to be able to get over, right? So very well publicized, and not a secret, like it, and as a production tool. So it will be interesting to see how this plays out, especially in consumers' perceptions too. Right? Like at the end of the day, like you got to have an audience, and so it'll be interesting to see. How the consumers react to this, but it definitely, obviously, the conversation picked up a whole lot of steam in the last few weeks between Eventus and the Velvet Sundown and others.
That's exactly right. Well, listen, as we sort of wind this thing down, Mike and I have a passion for documentaries, and we pulled up your page on documentaries, and I think of the 10 or so here, there's only 3 or 4 we haven't seen or talked about on the podcast, which we certainly will. But you had mentioned Led Zeppelin, and what I thought was interesting is, and I saw the documentary and I thought it was really, really well done, but it covers such a small slice of their career, and to see such lift from that tiny little piece of their career, it doesn't sound like it has to be a career spanning, retrospective. That just, people love documentaries. They love seeing how the sausage is made. I know I do. Talk a little bit about what you're learning about these documentaries and people's behavior surrounding them.
Yeah, so a couple of interesting things. When we printed this for the first time in our year end, there were a couple more current artists, right? I think there was a Megan Thee Stallion documentary that was in the top 10. There was a John Baptiste that was in the top 10. These are all more iconic and legacy acts in this top 10. And so it really does seem that there is a huge interest in, to your point, learning how the sausage is made or getting behind, especially for these iconic acts. There's the girl in the orchestra who did not have a sort of a mainstream popular career like the others in the list, but definitely still a passion point for a lot of people to be able to watch a story like that. But we are seeing that the fandom that surrounds these things can be quite powerful. And you're right. I think I watched the Led Zeppelin one. I think it carries through the first 2 records, right?
First 2, yeah.
Yeah, just the first 2. but it's enough for people to, really get passionate about the band again, want to go stream the band, go listen to all the records over again. And so these key media moments, even if you're right, it's about the first 2 records out of, their entire catalog, really drives a lot of mind share, a lot of activity, a lot of, hey, I want to go listen to them now too as well. So we are seeing that. It was interesting to me to see that every single one of these was more of a catalog or a legacy or a heritage type artist, which was very, very interesting, but it is driving a lot of activity. And it kind of gets back to, even what we talked about, like, US gamers who are more willing to watch, long type videos on these SVOD platforms. Like, could there be an outlet there? But it's like using these media moments as a way to engage fans around the music, and create a moment is really fascinating. And we're even seeing that in some ways. We're seeing that with the K-pop Demon Hunters too, right? Like, here's this music-based film that's starting to drive a lot of activity on DSP platforms. So it's just, one of the key takeaways I think from us for this report was that, like, entertainment overall is all entertainment, right? So, like, it's all intertwined. And in today's ecosystem, like, nothing is really siloed anywhere, right? Like, it's all accessible and it's all intertwined. It can have an impact.
100%. Jaime, thanks so much for taking the time to break this down. We love these chats with you so much. Where can people get the report, but your presentation that you're doing, are you going to record that? Is that something that will live online where people can go find it and view it if they miss it?
Yeah, definitely. So Luminate.com is where you can download the report in a PDF. There's also an interactive version. That will also be where after we do the webinar, that's where the video will end up living as well. And I believe what we'll be doing is we'll be putting it on the Midyear page. So if you go and you use the top bar at Luminate.com, you can find reports, find free reports, and then you can navigate to the Midyear report. And so the video will be on there as well.
Yeah, and a special shout out. I don't know who you guys use to create, not just take the data, but make it beautiful and understandable. Because look, data can be a little bit dry, but the way that it's presented in these reports is remarkable. I mean, you go through the report and you can visually wrap your head around some pretty complex trends. So kudos to your team and whoever's putting together these great reports.
Not lost.
Thanks, Jay.
That hard work is not lost on us. No.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's a our design team does a wonderful job. It really, this is kind of the top of the conversation, right? Like, it's, it feels like this really touches, a lot of the company, which is really fun and really great. And everybody, works so hard to put this out. So really, really happy to talk about it with you guys.
All right. Well, let's do this again. Jaime, thank you so much. Continued success. And we'll talk to you again soon, man. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, guys.
You've been listening to Your Morning Coffee, the weekly music news program for the new music business. Join Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart next time for the digital music news you need to know.